Hi everyone, it's Nick from SonicTone Amps. I wanted to take a minute to do this video real quick to talk about some of the different and common features across all the amps in the SonicTone product lineup. I figured this would be a good way to kind of do a little deeper dive and explain what they do and the differences among them a little more than what's in the manuals on the website. So we're going to start here with kind of a popular feature, which is the classic Hotrod switch. It's available on the 81 Special, the half pint, and also both the Class A amps, the SC6 and SC12. And what it is typically a switch in the front panel that when you go from classic to Hotrod, it engages more gain and gives you a little more aggressive sound on channel 2. And it does that by affecting the circuitry in one of the gain stages on channel 2 only. So it's a pretty good way to get a nice lead voicing and give you a little more bite, but it does differ from a similar feature that's on some other amps called the hot cool switch. So the hot cool switch is available on the Delta Junior, the Delta Deluxe, and the RC30, and it aims to achieve something similar to the Hotrod Classic switch, but it does it in a different way. Remember, the Hotrod Classic switch affects the circuitry of one of the gain stages on channel 2. What the hot cool switch does, it affects the circuitry on the EQ on channel 2, which is a little different. And it gives a little different vibe. It's a little more raw and a throatier of a sound, but still it's really good for leads. One thing about the hot cool switch is that when you do turn it on, it reduces the effect the EQ has overall on the channel, but it's a small price to pay for such a cool raw sound. Okay, the next set of features I want to talk about is a combination of features that are available on a few different models, starting with the tube solid-state rectifier switch right here. Pretty much all of the models that have a tube rectifier, like the Delta Deluxe here, the Clarksdale, the 67 Special, the Half Pint, and the RC30, all have the tube solid-state rectifier switch. The only model that doesn't have it, that has a tube rectifier, is the Delta Junior, because that is such a vintage circuit with a particular 5Y3 tube rectifier that it's actually impractical to do that switch and that feature with that tube rectifier. But the other ones can do it, and it gives you a nice tonal option. Again, I've got a video out on tube versus solid state rectification and the differences and how they sound different. But in general, the tube rectifier is a little more rounded, a little more compressed, a little more mellow, and then the solid state rectifier feels a little more firm and aggressive. So it's a pretty cool tonal option there with the flip of a switch. Moving on, another feature that sometimes works hand in hand with the rectification switch is the Punchy smooth switch. It's available on the Delta Deluxe here, the Clarksdale, the 67 Special, and also the Half Pint. And it is a negative feedback selector switch. And I was trying to think of the best way to describe what it does. And when you're using more negative feedback, it kind of smooths out the tone and makes it a little more reserved sounding. And then when you're using less negative feedback, it's a little more aggressive and a little more punchy sounding. And a lot of these amps, particularly the 67 Special, I like to call it sort of the 60 setting and the 70 setting. And so if you put it on the tube rectifier on smooth, you get a pretty reserved sound, kind of nice compression, nice roundness to it. And then if you put it on the punchy setting with the solid state rectifier, you get a nice aggressive kind of 70s rock sound setting, you know. So I think that's a pretty good way to play with those features. And the third option in this group of options here that I want to talk about, of course, is the half power switch. And that's available on all models except for the already low-powered 15-watt Delta Junior and the two Class A's, the 6-watt and the 12-watt. No real reason for a half power switch on those amps. But with it, of course, a quick flip of the switch, and you knock your power back by about half, and then, of course, reduce your volume output, which can be good for practice and bedroom levels. Another set of features I'd like to talk about, which seem pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go into a little bit here, is the difference between channel volumes and the solo boost. Channel volumes are pretty self-explanatory. In the modern series like the Loyalist, the Patriot, and the Mercenary, you have individual channel volumes. You set them exactly where you want them, and you can foot switch between to get your lead boost and whatever you need. When you have a solo boost, like on the 78 Special, the Snake Charmer, and there's even a lead version of the 81 Special that comes with a solo boost if you want that. What that does, it's an additive volume boost to an existing volume knob. So pretty simply, you would set, in this particular case with the 78 Special, you'd set that volume 2 to where you want it to be, and then you'd set your solo boost, and it might actually look like it's lower than volume 2, but it's adding to volume 2, so that can be your boost. If you were to crank this up, it would get very loud. It'd be essentially the same as just turning volume 2 way up. Now, one of the drawbacks of this is if you're going to drive the master low on an amp like this and drive volume 2 up to kind of get a little more crunch out of the phase inverter, then the effect of the solo boost becomes reduced, and it's only about a 2 to 3 dB boost. But if you've got the master volume up a bit, at least halfway, and you're driving channel 2 a little lower, like down at 1 or 2, then this becomes a wide range of boost, up to 12, almost 15 dB of boost. And finally, I like to talk about the effects loops that are available on certain SonicTone amplifiers. A lot of the models have effects loops. There's two different versions available. There's a basic where you just get a send and return jack, and then you have the on-off switch that you turn on manually on the back of the amp. And then there's a feature-rich version that comes with the send and return jack, an on-off switch, a series parallel switch, and send and return controls, and those versions are foot switchable, which is a really nice feature. Also, depending on the circuit of the amp, they could be solid state or they could be tube, which are both good. Tube will give you a little more warmer sound, and solid state will give you a real clean, pristine sound. The tube one works really great in the vintage series amps like the Clarksdale and the Delta Deluxe. They give you that warm sound for your delays and your reverbs. And the solid states are fine for the modern ones as well, where all the tubes are being used for all the gain stages. Of course, the ones that are feature rich, like the one on the back of the 78 Special, which is also a tube effects loop, give you the series parallel switch that when you click it into parallel, you can then use the send pot to give you a wet-dry control between dry and wet effects, which is really nice. And then you can tailor the overall output with the return knob here. Otherwise, if you just want a basic series effects loop, you can flip it back to series, and then you can use the send and return pots to kind of tailor your sound and the levels as your effects go through the amp. Now, these effects loops typically come with a little extra headroom in case your effects coming in maybe a little weak for whatever reason. So you can start them off at about 8 and 8 on the send and return. That probably will be pretty transparent and level, but if you need a little extra boost, you can always give yourself a little bit more with these controls here. And of course, a really cool feature is if you're not even going to use the effects loop, but it's the ones that are foot switchable, is it actually gives you the option, because this will just pass through when it's on, from the send jack to the return jack. You don't have to jumper it or anything. You can actually turn the effects loop on, reduce the effects return pot, and then turn it off, and it's the equivalent of turning this all the way up like a volume boost. So it gives you sort of a volume cut that you can turn off and return the amp back to full volume, so it actually acts kind of like a lead boost if you're not going to use the effects loop, but it is one of the foot switchable ones. So that about wraps up this overview of some of the common features on a lot of the SonicTone amp models. I hope that helps explain what they do and the differences between them, and I hope it helps you make any decisions on any SonicTone models you might be interested in the future. But as always, check back here at our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and check back for more videos, and then also check out all of our amps at SonicToneAmps.com. We'll see you soon.